I asked my parents to watch my son for the weekend. When I came back, he told me quietly, there wasn't much food. I didn't want to bother them. His face looked smaller somehow. I was shocked. And what I did next shocked my parents. When my 6-year-old tells me he skipped dinner so he would not be a problem, that is not a cute story. That is not a misunderstanding. That is the kind of sentence that rewires something inside you. I did not notice it at first. I had just picked up Mason from my parents' house on Sunday evening. It was supposed to be simple. 2 nights. I had a work conference out of town and daycare was closed for a staff retreat. My parents insisted. They said they missed him. They said it would be good bonding time. When I walked in to get him, the house smelled like takeout. My dad was at the kitchen table scrolling through car listings on his laptop. My mom was talking on the phone about financing options for my sister Emily's new SUV. Nobody looked rushed. Nobody looked overwhelmed. Mason ran to me and hugged my legs. He felt lighter than usual. I told myself I was imagining it. My mom said everything went great. They went to the park. They watched a movie. Mason was easy as always. On the drive home, Mason was quiet. He usually talks nonstop. Tells me about bugs he found, what grandpa said, what grandma cooked. That night he just stared out the window. I asked if he had fun. He nodded. I asked what his favorite part was. He shrugged. I thought maybe he was just tired. When we got home, I unpacked his little backpack. The lunchbox I had packed for Friday was still inside. Completely untouched. I stood there staring at it longer than I should have. I called out to him from the kitchen and asked if Grandma made him something different for lunch. He walked in slowly and said, almost like he was telling me a secret, there wasn't much food. I didn't want to bother them. I laughed at first because I genuinely thought he was joking. He was not. He told me they were busy looking at cars for Aunt Emily most of Saturday. He said they ordered food Friday night, but it was spicy and he did not like it. He said he just had cereal on Sunday morning because Grandma said they were going out to test drive something and did not have time to cook. He said it like he was explaining the weather. Then he added, I was not that hungry. That is when I really looked at him. His cheeks looked different. Not dramatic. Not skeletal. Just smaller. Like he had been holding something in all weekend. I asked if he told them he was hungry. He shook his head. Why not? Because they were busy. And Grandma said the car place closes early. I felt this cold, steady anger building in my chest. Not explosive. Not loud. Just steady. I called my mom immediately. I asked what Mason ate this weekend. She said, oh, you know how picky he is. He barely touched anything. Kids are like that. I asked if they actually made him meals. She said, Lucy, we fed him. Do not start. That was it. Do not start. I hung up before I said something I would regret. I made Mason pancakes at 9:30 at night. He ate 3 without stopping. 3. After he went to bed, I opened the fridge and stared at it like it had answers. I was trying to decide if this was neglect or just carelessness. If I was overreacting or if I had just handed my child over to people who saw him as an inconvenience. Then I remembered something that made my stomach drop. My sister had posted photos all weekend. Test driving cars. Smiling in showrooms. Captioned best weekend ever. Could not have done it without Mom and Dad. And in none of those photos was Mason anywhere in sight. That is when I decided I was not going to yell. I was going to do something else. And by Monday morning I had a plan. By Monday morning I was calm in a way that probably would have scared my parents if they could see inside my head. I did not call them again. I did not text. I did not post anything passive-aggressive. I went to work, sat through meetings, and smiled at people who had no idea that all I could think about was my son quietly deciding he was not important enough to ask for food. Around noon I called my sister Emily. I asked how the new car search was going. She launched into it immediately. She said Mom and Dad spent all Saturday driving her to 3 dealerships. She said they even skipped lunch because they did not want to lose time before one of the showrooms closed. Skipped lunch. I asked if Mason was with them the whole time. He paused and said, yeah, I think so. He was in the back seat with an iPad most of the time. I asked if anyone stopped to get him food. She said, Lucy, he is not a baby. If he was hungry, he would have said something. That sentence settled it for me. After work, I took Mason to his pediatrician. I did not tell my parents. I just said I wanted to check his weight because he seemed off. The nurse weighed him twice because she thought the scale might be wrong. He had lost almost 3 pounds since his last visit. 3 pounds on a 6-year-old is not dramatic in adult terms. But on him it was noticeable. The doctor asked if he had been sick. I said no. She asked if there were any changes at home. I hesitated for a second, then said he stayed with my parents over the weekend and mentioned there was not much food. The doctor did not overreact. She just looked at me for a long moment and said that should not happen. I drove home feeling like something inside me had hardened. That evening my mom finally called. She said Emily picked a car. A silver SUV. They were going to surprise her with help on the down payment. He sounded excited, like she expected me to be excited too. I said that was nice. Then I told her I took Mason to the doctor. She went quiet. I told her he lost weight. I told her what he said. I did not yell. I just repeated his exact words. There wasn't much food. I didn't want to bother them. She said, Lucy, that is dramatic. He always says things like that. We had snacks. He could have asked. I asked her one question. When did you actually sit down and make him a meal? She started talking about how busy the weekend was. How Emily needed support. How dealerships do not wait. That was the moment I realized something ugly. They did not forget to feed him. They just decided something else was more important. I told her I would be coming over Wednesday night. I said we needed to talk in person. She said that was unnecessary. I said it was happening anyway. After I hung up, I did something that shocked even me. I called my lawyer friend Rachel. Not to sue. Not yet. But to ask what my options were if I ever needed to formally restrict grandparents from unsupervised visits. Rachel did not ask too many questions. He just said, document everything. So I did. I saved the doctor's visit summary. I took photos of Mason's weight chart. I wrote down exactly what he told me word for word while it was still fresh. I was not planning a fight. I was preparing for one. And on Wednesday night I walked into my parents' house with a folder in my bag. They thought it was going to be a conversation. They had no idea it was going to be a line in the sand. Wednesday night felt strangely normal. My dad opened the door like nothing was wrong. The TV was on. My mom was in the kitchen cutting fruit. It almost made me question myself. Almost. I sat at the table and put the folder in front of me. Neither of them asked what it was. My mom started first. She said, Lucy, you are blowing this out of proportion. He was fine. Kids exaggerate. I opened the folder and slid the doctor's summary across the table. My dad adjusted his glasses and looked at the weight chart. He said kids fluctuate. It happens. I told them the pediatrician asked if there were changes at home. I told them she said that should not happen. My mom crossed her arms and said we had food in the house. I asked what exactly they made him Saturday. She said there were leftovers. I asked what leftovers. She hesitated, then said takeout. I asked if they noticed he did not eat it. My dad jumped in and said he is picky. You know that. We cannot force him. I asked if they offered him anything else. Silence. That silence said more than any excuse. Then my mom said something that changed the entire conversation. She said, Lucy, we were trying to help your sister. She finally has her life together. You have always been the independent one. You can handle things. I just looked at her. I asked if that meant my son was less of a priority. She said, do not twist my words. But she did not deny it. I told them something I had never said out loud before. I said I have spent years being the low-maintenance daughter. The one who does not ask for help. The one who figures it out. I said that does not mean my child deserves less attention. My dad said we gave up our whole weekend. I said you chose how to spend it. Then I told them Mason thought he would be a bother if he asked for food. That is when my mom finally looked unsettled. She said he must have misunderstood. I told her 6-year-olds do not invent that kind of thought out of nowhere. There was a long pause. Then my dad said, what do you want from us? I had rehearsed that question in my head all week. I said I want to know that if I leave my son with you, he is the priority. Not Emily. Not a car dealership. Not anything else. My mom said, so what, you are going to punish us over one weekend? I took a breath. I told them there would be no more unsupervised visits for now. The words hung in the air. My dad said that is extreme. My mom said you are being emotional. I told them this is not emotional. This is a boundary. They both started talking at once about how unfair it was. About how much they love Mason. About how I was overreacting. I did not argue. I just stood up and said this is not permanent. But it is not negotiable. As I walked toward the door, my mom said, if you do this, do not expect us to help you again. That was supposed to scare me. Instead it clarified everything. Because I realized something else in that moment. They were not worried about losing Mason. They were worried about losing control. And I was not done yet. I thought that was the end of it. It was not. 2 days later, my Aunt Carol called me. She asked why I was keeping Mason away from his grandparents. She said my mom was devastated. She said the whole family was confused. That was interesting because I had not told anyone except Rachel. I asked what exactly my mom said. Carol hesitated, then told me my mom claimed I accused them of starving Mason. She said I stormed into their house, threatened legal action, and said they were unfit. None of that happened. By that evening, 2 more relatives texted me. One of them asked if Mason was safe with me. That one actually made me laugh. So now I understood. They were not going to reflect. They were going to rewrite. I called my mom and asked her directly why she was telling people I accused them of abuse. She said, "Lucy, I had to explain why you are overreacting." I said, "You could have told the truth." She said, "The truth is you are punishing us." That was when I realized this was no longer about food. This was about reputation. My parents care deeply about how they are seen. Church, neighbors, extended family. The image of generous grandparents who sacrifice everything for their family. That image matters to them more than almost anything. And suddenly I understood what I needed to do next. Sunday afternoon, I invited them over to my house. They looked cautious when they walked in. My mom brought cookies. My dad avoided eye contact with Mason like he was not sure what to say. I told them to sit down. I said I wanted to clear the air. Then I pulled out my phone and placed it on the table. I said I was going to record the conversation. Not to post it. Not to embarrass them. Just to have a record of what was actually said. They both froze. My dad said that was unnecessary. I said so was telling the family I threatened you. My mom looked at the phone like it was a weapon. I pressed record. I calmly asked them to explain on record what Mason ate that weekend. They stumbled through the same explanations. Snacks. Leftovers. Busy schedule. Then I asked if they believed a 6-year-old should feel like a bother asking for food. My mom said of course not. I asked if they understood why that scared me. Long pause. My dad finally said we should have paid more attention. It was not an apology, but it was the closest thing I had heard. I stopped recording. Then I told them something I had not planned to say. I said if anyone else contacts me questioning my parenting because of a story you spread, I will send them this recording. The room went completely quiet. I did not raise my voice. I did not threaten to blast it publicly. I just stated a fact. That is when my mom's expression changed. For the first time she looked unsure of her position. They left shortly after. By Tuesday the phone calls from relatives stopped. But that is when something else happened. Mason asked me a question that I was not prepared for. He asked if Grandma and Grandpa were mad at him. And that question cut deeper than anything my parents had done so far. When Mason asked if they were mad at him, I realized how far this had already gone. I told him no. I told him this was between grown-ups. I told him he did nothing wrong. He nodded, but he kept picking at the sleeve of his shirt like he was still trying to solve something in his head. That night, after he went to bed, I checked my email and saw something I did not expect. My parents had transferred $5,000 into my account. The note said for Mason. Groceries, clothes, whatever he needs. I stared at the screen for a long time. It was not an apology. It was a transaction. I called my dad. He said we thought this would smooth things over. I asked if they thought this was about money. He said, "Lucy, we are trying to help." I told him help would have been making him a sandwich. He said I was dragging this out. Then he said something that caught my attention. He said, "Emily feels awful about this." That surprised me. I had barely spoken to my sister since that phone call about the dealership. I assumed she was on their side. Later that evening, Emily texted me. She asked if we could talk privately. We met the next day at a coffee shop near her apartment. She looked exhausted. She told me she did not realize Mason had not been eating properly. She said she thought Mom and Dad handled it. She admitted they were so focused on the car that the weekend revolved around it. Then she told me something I did not see coming. She said the SUV was never really about her. I asked what she meant. She said our parents had been planning to co-sign the loan in their own name. The car was technically going to be theirs, under their control, with her making the payments. I did not understand at first. Then she said they wanted leverage. Leverage. She said they did something similar when she was in college. Helped with tuition, then used it to dictate where she lived and who she dated. She said this car was supposed to be another string attached. And suddenly the whole weekend made sense. Mason was not just a distraction. He was an obstacle. They needed that weekend to secure something bigger. Something that kept Emily dependent. Something that maintained the same dynamic they always had. I asked her if she went through with it. She shook her head. She said after hearing what happened with Mason she backed out of the deal. And now our parents were furious. Not because of me. Because they lost control of her too. That is when I realized my boundary with Mason had triggered something much larger. This was not just about my son. This was about the way they built loyalty through obligation. And for the first time, Emily and I were standing on the same side of something. But I knew our parents were not going to accept that quietly. I just did not know how far they were willing to go. I found out how far they were willing to go the following Friday. I was at work when my phone rang. It was Mason's school. The secretary asked if everything was okay at home. My stomach dropped. She said my parents had shown up to pick Mason up early. They told the front office there was a family situation, and that I was overwhelmed. I had never authorized them for pickup. I told the school absolutely not. I said I was on my way. By the time I got there my parents were in the office. My mom was sitting stiffly in one of those tiny chairs. My dad was talking to the principal like they were longtime friends. When he saw me he said we were just trying to help. I asked why they told the school I was overwhelmed. He said we are worried about you. You have been acting unstable. Unstable. That word hit differently. I asked if they were implying I was not capable of caring for my own child. My mom jumped in and said, Lucy, this is exactly what we mean. You are escalating everything. The principal looked uncomfortable. I showed her the email confirming that only I was authorized for pickup. I explained calmly that there was no emergency. My dad said they were concerned because I was isolating Mason from family. Concerned. I realized then this was their next move. If they could not control me with guilt and they could not control Emily with money, they would question my stability. Not publicly. Not yet. Just enough to plant doubt. The principal handed Mason to me and said all future pickup requests would require written authorization directly from me. She was polite, but I could see the caution in her eyes. That was enough. Outside the school I told my parents they were done. No more visits. Supervised or otherwise. My mom said you cannot keep him from us. I said watch me. My dad said you would take him away from his grandparents over one misunderstanding. I said this stopped being about food the moment you tried to make me look unstable to get access to my child. They both started talking at once about how they had rights, how courts favor grandparents in some cases, how I was making a mistake. That did not scare me the way they expected. Because I had already spoken to Rachel again. And I had already documented the school incident. I did not yell. I did not argue. I just told them any further attempts to undermine me would go through a lawyer. Then I walked Mason to the car. That night I transferred the $5,000 back into their account. No note. Emily called me later and said our parents were furious. She said they felt betrayed. She said they kept repeating that I was turning everyone against them. I told her I was not turning anyone. I was just refusing to play the role they assigned me. It has been 3 months now. They have not seen Mason. He has gained the weight back. He laughs the way he used to. He no longer hesitates before asking for a snack. Last week he asked if Grandma and Grandpa still loved him. I told him love is not just what people say. It is what they do. And for the first time in my life, I understood that protecting my child might mean losing my parents. If that is the cost, I am fine with it.